Have you ever stopped to think about what it actually takes to get a new medicine from some lab discovery all the way to your local pharmacy? It is a famously long, incredibly difficult journey. We're talking more than a decade, billions of dollars, and for most drugs that start that journey, well, it ends in failure. But the reason why they fail has totally changed, and that change is revolutionizing how we create safer medicines for all of us.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at the massive challenge of drug development, the gauntlet. Then, we'll look at the old, kind of flawed way of doing things and see how a brand new approach is flipping the script. We'll even peek inside the virtual tech that makes it all possible, see how that translates to real-world human trials, and then we'll wrap up by looking at what this all means for the future.
So, first up, the drug development gauntlet. This is the high-stakes, super high-risk world where these brilliant scientific ideas come face-to-face with the harsh reality of clinical trials. It's often called the valley of death for new medicines, and for good reason.
And here is the big twist. For decades, the number one reason a drug failed was, well, pretty simple. It just didn't work like they hoped it would. But today, that's not the biggest hurdle anymore. A truly staggering number of promising drugs now fail in the final stages of trials because they turn out to have unforeseen safety issues or toxic side effects.
And that late-stage failure, it comes with a price tag that is just mind-boggling. We are talking an average of $2.6 billion to develop one single drug. A huge chunk of that cost is just eaten up by the drugs that fail the safety test right before the finish line. It's an incredibly expensive problem to have.
And this timeline really shows you why it's so costly. A company can spend 6, 7, even 8 years and hundreds of millions of dollars on a single compound, only to discover a critical, fatal safety flaw when it's finally tested in people. So you have to ask, why was the process ever designed this way in the first place?
Well, let's dive into that. This brings us to our next section, looking at that old and very costly path and really understanding why that traditional blueprint was such a massive gamble.
So the old way was totally linear. Scientists would find a promising molecule, they'd work tirelessly to make it as powerful and effective as possible, and then, only after all that time and money was spent, would they run the critical safety tests as the very last step. This meant huge amounts of resources were poured into drugs that really were destined to fail from the get-go because of some hidden toxic flaw. Which brings us to a fundamental, game-changing shift in thinking. Section 3. Flipping the script. The entire industry is moving away from that old model to a brand new safety-first paradigm.
The new mantra is fail fast and fail cheap. Now, the point isn't to avoid failure. That's impossible in science. The goal is to find the compounds that are going to fail because of safety issues as early as humanly possible. Before you've spent a decade and $1 billion on them.
And here's what that looks like. The whole process is basically inverted. Before anything else happens, thousands of virtual compounds are screened on a computer for their safety profile. Only the candidates that look both effective and safe from the very beginning even get to move on. This lets researchers move forward with so much more confidence.
So you've heard me say this weird acronym, ADMET, a few times. It is the absolute key to all of this. ADMET is basically the biography of a drug in the body, how it's absorbed, where it's distributed, how it's metabolized and excreted, and, most importantly, its potential toxicity. Predicting this profile early is the entire name of the game now.
So how in the world is this even possible? Well, let's enter the virtual proving ground. We're going to take a look inside the incredible software that's making this whole safety-first approach a reality through some really powerful simulation.
Let's start with a classic, absolutely critical question for any drug developer. Can this drug cross the blood-brain barrier? Now, depending on what the drug is for, the answer could make it either a life-saving therapy or a dangerous toxin for your central nervous system.
Instead of years of lab work, this software can predict the answer in moments. It maps out molecules based on their properties, and these ellipses, they tell a researcher with 95 or even 99% confidence whether their drug is likely to get into the brain. This lets them tweak the molecule's design virtually, long before they ever even think about making it in a lab. It's amazing.
Now let's talk about one of the biggest safety hurdles of all, liver damage, or hepatotoxicity. It is the #1 reason why drugs get recalled after they've already been approved and are on the market, which is, of course, the absolute worst-case scenario for patients.
The simulation software tackles this problem head-on. It checks a new molecule against a massive database of compounds that are already known to be toxic to the liver. It also predicts that the drug might mess with key enzymes like CYP2D6, which could cause really dangerous interactions with other common medications someone might be taking.
And then there's this really delicate balancing act. See, a drug has to be water-soluble enough so your body can absorb it, but it also has to be fat-soluble, or lipophilic, so it can pass through cell membranes to actually do its job. The software helps chemists find this perfect ADMET sweet spot on the computer, guiding them to design a much better-behaved molecule right from the start.
Okay, this is all incredibly cool on a computer screen, but how does it actually make a difference for real people? Let's connect the dots and see how this simulation translates directly to clinical reality. The end result of all this simulation isn't just a bunch of data. It's put together into what's called a scientific dossier. Think of it like the ultimate evidence package. It's this complete predictive profile of the drug that researchers can take to regulators like the FDA to justify why their drug is safe enough to even begin testing in humans.
And here is a perfect real-world example of how it works. Let's say the software predicts a new drug is cleared out of the body mainly by the kidneys. Well, that prediction directly shapes the design of the clinical trial. The study will specifically exclude patients who have kidney problems, which makes the whole thing fundamentally safer for everyone involved. The virtual data literally protects real patients.
So, let's zoom out for our final section here. The future of pharmacology. What does this massive shift toward predictive, safety-first design really mean for all of us?
You know, the big takeaway is this. While failing fast and failing cheap is great for the business side of things, the true revolution here is about patient safety. By weeding out these dangerous compounds before they ever get near a human being, we are building a foundation for a new generation of medicines that are not only more innovative, but are designed from day one to be fundamentally safer.
And that leaves us with one last kind of mind-blowing thought. We're moving so fast into an era of personalized medicine, where treatments can be tailored to our own unique genetic profiles. So the question is no longer just if we can simulate a safe drug, but could we one day use this same technology to simulate the perfect, safest, most effective drug just for you?